there's something that they call the spending smile. And what that says is that when you first retire, your spending's high because you have your health, you have your spouse, and you can go do all of this stuff you've always wanted to do. So you spend more on travel and what have you. And then as retirement goes on, you simplify. You have one car, you tend to split a meal when you go out to dinner. You're 80 years old and you're tired of dealing with the airports, and so you just don't want to travel as much anymore. And so life starts to slow down a little bit. And then towards the end of life, expenses start to go up again with things like healthcare.
Welcome to the Healthy Investor Podcast with Bob Mastroianni, where you and I will learn from successful real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and other highly driven individuals about their journey and the healthy habits and routines that play an integral part of their growth. All right, welcome back to the Healthy Investor Podcast. I am your host, Bob Mastroianni, and today I have with me Jason Parker. Jason is the best-selling author of Sound Retirement Planning and the host of Sound Retirement Radio. He has been seen as a frequent guest on ABC, Fox, and NBC. He is the inventor of the retirement budget calculator. He has earned the advanced retirement designation of a retirement income certified professional. Jason is the president of Parker Financial LLC, which is an independent, fee-only registered investment advisory firm and operates as a fiduciary. I'm really excited to have Jason on today because we are going to discuss the budget retirement calculator, where he talks about how to provide retirement calculations for the DIY crowd. So very interesting. Jason, thanks so much for coming on today.
Bob, what an honor to be a guest on your show. Thank you. And I love that the title is The Healthy Investor. You know, that's what we want. We want healthy people and healthy communities.
Yeah. Well, for me, it started out as I really have two passions. And, one is my real estate investing. And then sort of a little later in life, I guess around 40 years old, I realized that some of my healthy habits, healthy routines were important to me. I had a little bit of a change in lifestyle. I started running, exercising, become a little more fit. I found the triathlon community. And then I started to realize that those habits and routines really played into my business, my investment. And so it created a curiosity. It gave me the ability to reach out to people like you, learn about your business, and then what habits and routines sort of work in your environment and kind of make you click. So that's where it came from.
I love that. Yeah, you're right. There's something great. Just this morning, I was out jogging, and I think I'm a couple of years ahead of you in terms of age, but I was out running, and as I'm getting older, I'm almost 50 now, but I'm feeling some pain in my hips and my knees. I'm starting to get a little bit of plantar fasciitis. But this morning out in the Seattle area, I was running, it was raining, and I was just so grateful that I could still do what I do. But I can see things changing physically for me. I know that there's going to come a time where I'm going to have to start doing different types of exercises. But I like you, I really enjoy running. There's something magical about having a cup of coffee, having some caffeine flowing through your system, having that blood and that oxygen flowing through your brain. And then for me, I like to listen to podcasts. And so to be able to listen to something encouraging and positive and something that's instructive and teaching, that's just a great cocktail for getting the day started right, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said that you get to do this, right? And that's something that my friends and I, that we do triathlons together. It's one thing we remind each other of. Sometimes people are exercising, working out, doing some of the things, and the words that come out of their mouths is often, I have to do this. I have to run 6 miles today, or I have to go for this swim. And, we get to do this. There's so many people that aren't able to, and there are so many people that, no longer have the opportunity to do it. So as long as we can, we're going to keep doing it.
Boy, and just that little bit of change in our vocabulary, I have to versus I get to, changes everything when all of a sudden working out becomes I get to, I don't have to. And, there was a woman that I met, she and her husband, I met them right before they retired. She was walking down the street at dusk and was hit from behind by a truck 1 week after retirement.
Mm.
and her vertebrae was separated from her hips and totally changed the path and the direction of her life, as you could imagine. She
Yeah.
ended up in a nursing home. But her ability to still experience joy in the midst of what most people would consider suffering was in large part due to her faith. And she
Mm.
was she was she was a woman of faith. And I remember that when I met with her, even after this extraordinary event that totally changed the direction of their life, she was so excited that she was able to share her faith with other people that were on their way out of this world towards the end of their life. And I thought that was really inspiring. But you're right, things change. What we can do today, we won't necessarily be able to do forever. My friend and mentor, a guy that taught me a lot about what I know in this business today, he passed away a couple of years ago. And towards the end of his life, he had about 2 weeks left. We didn't know it at the time, but I was talking to him, and I was just like, and he started crying. He was saying, "Jason, I just want a little bit more time." He ended up with throat cancer, and
Mm.
that's what how he finished, almost 80 years old. But I asked him, I said, "Dean, what would you do? Why do you want more time? What is it?" And he said, "I'd just like to take my daughter to Alaska and go fishing." And I said, "Well, you've done that." He said, "Well, I want to do it again." And so, but yeah, it's those types of things that remind me that life is such a joy and such a privilege, and you don't want to miss any of it. And so, yeah, to be able to do something you love, like the work that you're doing, where you get to do real estate and you get to incorporate living a healthy lifestyle into that, what a blessing.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I appreciate you saying that. We sort of went down the second part of the podcast first, but I'm cool with that.
Sorry.
No, no, it's great. So why don't we back up just a little bit and let's talk about, sound retirement planning. Let's talk about, your retirement budget calculator. I can tell you that this is a little bit of a passion project for me because as getting closer to 50 also, I'm 47 years old, so not too far behind. And I see some of the elders in my family who are of retirement age and looking at who is able to retire versus who may not be able to have the same kind of retirement that they want to. And then I also just look at my life, my family's life. I have a 12-year-old daughter, my wife and I. And so, you know, what does retirement look like for us? And then, what tricks or tips or what information can we give to people to help them prepare for the kind of retirement that they want? And I think it's a very interesting conversation when we think about, you've worked a very long time in your life. You've worked more than 50% of your life to now retire, and what does that look like for you, and then what do you want it to look like, and how can you change that? So very, very interested in learning some of your theories behind that and then getting into the calculator.
Man, me too. You nailed it. I mean, everything you're talking about there, that's what I've spent my entire career focused on is retirement. So a little bit of backstory. Like I was saying, I had the opportunity. I met a guy in my mid 20s who became my mentor, my friend Dean. Dean had owned his own broker dealer. And when I met him, he was in his mid 60s. And Dean, that one relationship totally changed the direction of my life. So after meeting him, he helped me start a registered investment advisory firm. We're an SEC registered investment advisory firm out here in Seattle. I walk life with a lot of people, helping them prepare for retirement. And several years ago, I started doing a podcast. So we currently have a little over 1 million downloads on Sound Retirement Radio. It's become one of the, if you do a search for retirement, we're one of the top podcasts in that space. And then shortly after, it actually started as a radio show here in the Seattle area, but as a podcast at the same time. And then I wrote my first book, Sound Retirement Planning. That became a bestseller on Amazon. And I've got this really cool screenshot with my book and Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki, kind of three books lined up together there. We spent a couple of weeks on the #1 spot in Amazon. And over the course of the years, several years now, one of the questions that I've been asking myself is, a lot of the people that listen to the podcast and read the books are not necessarily people that want to work with an advisor. They kind of fall more into this DIY camp. They're happy to do this on their own. So then I started saying, well, how can we help more people achieve clarity, confidence, and freedom as they're preparing for retirement? Those are the three things that we're trying to help people achieve through education. And that's what we're doing with the podcast and the books. And then I started building software. And I said, we can build software to help make people's lives better. People that don't necessarily want to work with an advisor, they can have access to these tools. Sometimes people would try to create spreadsheets, they make an error in their calculations, and there's so many moving parts that to build, and that's actually how the retirement budget calculator was started. It started as a spreadsheet that I had built for my family. And then we've just continued to add on it and add on it and add on it. Today we have thousands of people using the retirement budget calculator as a tool to do two things. Number one is to make sure you've got a really good spending plan as you're preparing for retirement. But then one of the cool things about the calculator is it helps people project out into the future. How
Hmm.
is this going to work? Have we saved enough? Are we going to be okay? Are we going to be able to have this retirement of our dreams and not just survive retirement? And so that's what we're doing with the calculator, and that's why I'm excited to be here to share with your listeners, to let them know that this tool exists, that it's a resource available to them. It's a freemium tool, just so you know. You can sign up for free and use the budgeting, the net worth, and the time tab for free. And then if you want any of the advanced modules, like if you want to be able to project your taxes out into the future or see if your money's going to last as long as you do, then you pay either $95 a year to have access to the calculator or $9.95 a month if you just want to pay for it monthly.
Wow. That's so interesting. Just to back up a little bit, when you said that you really feel like people who start to consume your content, majority of them may not be looking necessarily for a financial advisor. And I think you're absolutely correct on that. And it's sort of knowing your demographic and who's the avatar that listens to your podcast, who's the avatar that reads your book. So, and how can you provide value for those people? So I guess some questions related to retirement calculation and, the retirement budget calculator. Are there specific age ranges that you're looking at right now? Or is there an age where you may say, oh, maybe it's a little bit late, or is there a specific age range where this is most valuable?
It was designed specifically for people who are within 5 years of retirement.
Okay.
And 5 years of retirement could be somebody that's 45 years old and is going to retire at 50. But I would say most of the people that are using our calculator are 55 years old and they're getting ready for retirement in the next 5 years. So they're thinking they're going to retire by age 60. When it comes to planning, you can never start early enough. And I had the opportunity to speak at the local high school recently with some young kids and just encourage them on just what even investing $200 a month could mean for them 40 years out into the future. And everybody can be a millionaire in the United States. It doesn't take a lot. $200 a month, it will get you there if you invest in something like the S&P 500, or if we end up with stock market returns that get you about 10% per year. I know you're more of a real estate guy. There's a lot of different ways to get to accumulate wealth in our country. But two of the most popular are either in investing in businesses, becoming an investor in the stock market where you own businesses, you own a little slice of the businesses, or you buy real estate and you enjoy the appreciation of real estate as well as the cash flow associated with it. So lots of different ways to get there, but it's never too early to get started. But for the people that are getting ready to retire, so those people within 5 years of retirement that want to have a good plan, retirement doesn't have to be super complicated. There's really three numbers you need to understand. The first number is how long are you going to live? Because we need to know how long your money needs to last. The second number is how much money have you saved? So if you go through and you add up all your IRAs and 401ks and HSAs and TSPs and 403bs and brokerage accounts and money markets, checking, saving, just all these different places people have money stashed aside. And then how much do you spend? And I would argue, and if I had to do it all over again, I probably would not have given the tool the name retirement budget calculator, because the word budget, I've come to learn, really offends some people. Like to them, it means having to cut back. But really, that's not what we're trying to do in the calculator. What we're trying to do is help people figure out how much they can spend without running out of money in retirement. Because really, that's ultimately what people want to do. I've heard so many people say to me, Jason, if I want to spend my last dollar as I take my last breath, or I want to bounce my check to the undertaker, they just want to leave the world with the exactly amount that they came into the world with, which for most people it's zero, but the spending piece is the most important piece of the entire plan, because how much you spend is the number that determines if you saved enough. So for example, if you know, let's say you're going to have $40,000 a year Social Security income, but your budget, after you look through all of your numbers, you realize, boy, I really need to spend about $80,000 a year. So you've got this baseline of $40,000 coming in from Social Security. You're going to need to replace or get up to $40,000 of income. So then the question becomes, well, how much do I need to have saved to support that spending amount? And the number is 25 times. So in this case, you take 40,000 times 25. It says you need $1 million portfolio. And then that assumes that you've got 60% stock, 40% bonds. Now, one of the things you're going to love as a real estate investor in the retirement budget calculator, a lot of the calculators out there only focus on stocks and bonds. But in our calculator, because you can create very specific income streams that happen, you can have rental property, cash flow coming in from that rental property. You can show that those rents increase 1% per year to account for inflation. And then you can also have a mortgage in there that's an expense maybe on that rental property, and you can have a certain date in the future where you show that expense going away. That way you're managing all of these different cash flows. So retirement at the end of the day is an exercise in cash flow. It's how much income do you have coming in and how much expense do you have going out. And when you have more income coming in than expenses going out, or when you've saved enough to support that spending, that's when you can retire and do it with confidence. So again, the three things we're always trying to deliver to people are clarity, confidence, and freedom. And the way that you get there is understanding how long are you going to live, how much have you saved, and how much do you spend.
I love your three questions. So the first one, I don't know that anyone, unless you really have a crystal ball, you can't answer the first question precisely how long are you going to live, other than there's actuarial assumptions about how long people are going to live in most cases. And, our goal and even talking about the healthy portion of this, right? We want to extend that. But looking at how much have you saved, I think that falls into two categories when I speak with people. One is that, when I talk to people about net worth calculation, because that's something that, at some points I've created net worth calculators, I've shared them with friends. And, I think to some extent people underestimate what they truly have that is an asset, right? So we have certain assets that are our net worth. When you talk about your savings, you talk about your investments and sort of what does that look like. So that's a pretty good one to indicate, obviously, how much have you saved, where have you gone with this so far. But looking at the third one, something sort of jumped out to me, and that's where I had a couple follow-up questions I'd love to ask you about. How much do you spend? Two interesting trains of thought. One is that I often wonder, as people get close to retirement age, do they sell themselves short on how much they think they're going to spend and then really decrease what they want their lifestyle to be? Because, the intention of being systematic about trying to plan your retirement, the intentionality behind investments is that we want to create certain freedoms for our life, right? We want to create time freedom. We want to do what we want, when we want, with who we want, where we want.
Yes,
So,
come on, preach it.
yeah. I hear so many people talk about, oh, when I retire, I'm going to travel. I'm going to go here. I'm going to do this. And then do they then look at their retirement and say, oh, well, I don't need that much money, and then sort of cap themselves in a way. So I wonder, is the question, how much do you spend or how much do you intend to spend? I wonder if sometimes there's a difference in understanding there for people, or what do you see with that? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, when doing planning, I always like to say hope for the best, plan for the worst. So
Okay.
let's talk about what that means in all three of these different areas. Number one, when it comes to life expectancy, you're going to think this is really twisted, but when I first built the calculator, we had a countdown timer for the number of days, the number of days remaining based on life expectancy. And it was really kind of a twisted way of looking at mortality. But so what we do in the calculator is we do use Social Security mortality tables for coming up with a baseline, saying, okay, on average, a guy that's like me, 48 years old, the calculator says I'm going to live to age 80. That's the average life expectancy based on Social Security mortality tables. But then what we do in the calculator, that gives us kind of a starting point, right? Okay, on average, 50% of people live this long. But I'm like you. I take care of myself. I don't drink alcohol. I exercise on a regular basis. I think that I'm living a pretty clean lifestyle. So, and then my grandfather's 95 years old and he's still going. So in the calculator,
Excellent.
you can make a hereditary adjustment. So you can say, well, 80 may be average, but I'm above average, so I'm going to make it to 92 or 95. Or you can say I'm going to make it to 100 or 110. I mean, you decide how long you get to decide how long you're going to put into the calculator there. So that's number one. Number two, that you're going to really love this. On the net worth tab, you'd be amazed at how many people have never really just added up everything they owe and everything they own.
Hmm.
And that's what the net worth tab does. But even better than that, we created something in the net worth tab called snapshots. And remember, these first two tabs are free to use. Everybody, actually, the first three tabs are totally free to use. So on the net worth tab, you can create a snapshot. What the snapshot does, and I like to do this every month, I go through and I update the values of all of those accounts, my checking, savings, brokerage, IRAs, 401ks, all of that stuff, the value of my real estate, how much I owe. And so every month I get a snapshot to see how those numbers are changing. And it's really valuable, especially in the world that we live in today where there's so much perceived volatility.
Mm.
Like if you ask most people what's going on in the world right now, people think the sky is falling and the world's about to come to an end. But the reality is the market was up 7% the fourth quarter of 2022, and it was up 7% the first quarter of 2023. So while people are making all these preparations and plans about how bad things are going to get, the market's up 14% in the last two quarters. So, they're missing out on opportunities because they're stuck in fear. And when you are actually tracking the numbers every month, you can say, boy, things aren't as bad as I thought, at least as they pertain to my specific situation. And again, you can do that for free in the calculator. And then that last number, the spending number. So there's a couple of different ways to think about this. From a retirement research standpoint, the Morningstar put a study out called, there's something that they call the spending smile. And what that says is that when you first retire, your spending's high because you have your health, you have your spouse, and you can go do all of this stuff you've always wanted to do. So you spend more on travel and what have you. And then as retirement goes on, you simplify. You have one car, you tend to split a meal when you go out to dinner. You're 80 years old and you're tired of dealing with the airports, and so you just don't want to travel as much anymore. And so life starts to slow down a little bit. And then towards the end of life, expenses start to go up again with things like healthcare expenses. And so you can model that in the calculator. But one of the things that we wanted to do is they make it sound like understanding your spending is a big mystery, and it really isn't. If you spend about an hour, you can have a pretty good handle. And in the calculator, we have all this template data that we provide. So how much do you spend on your mortgage, your principal and interest payment, taxes, insurance? How much do you spend on garbage, water, sewer, electric, cell phone bill? Are you paying for any streaming services? So a lot of this stuff is pretty constant. Every month you have these expenses. You spend money on groceries and dining out and gasoline. And it really doesn't fluctuate as much as people think that it does for those baseline expenses. So in the calculator, you can add custom expenses to you, or you can use all of our template data to put information in there. And then you mark those expenses as either essential or discretionary.
Hmm.
Essential expenses are the things you can't live without. You can't go without buying groceries for your family. That is not negotiable. But your Netflix, is that really essential? You can probably live without it if you had to. So you mark that as a discretionary expense. And then what it allows you to do, because you can put, say, hey, I want to spend 20,000 a year on travel when I first retire. You can put that in there and mark it as a discretionary expense. And then you can, when you model your numbers to see if they're going to work, you can run it both ways. Say, well, run the number based on all of the expenses I put in, or run it just based on my essential expenses. And so you can start to play around. You can create these different models to see, are we going to be able to really live the life of our dreams where we can do everything that we want to do, or are we going to, is it going to be tight? And you would think that if you saved, say, $10 million, that you would have plenty of money for retirement. But I've met people that have saved $10 million and they're spending six, seven, $800,000 a year. And so it's really not how much have you saved, but how much do you spend that determines whether or not you're going to be able to have the lifestyle you want in retirement. Because unfortunately, you know this, but as people's income increases, as their wealth increases, their expectations increase. And where they live and how much they pay in property taxes and the types of travel that they go and who they bring on those trips. Everything increases if you're not really careful. There's this lifestyle creep that happens.
Hmm.
So it's again, we're not trying to get people to cut back by using the calculator. We're trying to get them to understand how can they live their best life and what does that look like and are they going to be okay? The number one question people have when they're trying to navigate this is, am I going to run out of money in retirement? And they don't ever want to become a burden to the people they care about, to their kids or their family, either physically or financially, and that's what the calculator is designed to do, is to help take away that number one fear that people have. The reality is a lot of people can't afford a financial advisor or they don't have enough assets to work with a financial advisor. And so, you go find a good advisor to put together a detailed cash flow plan for you, and you could spend anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 to have them create that type of cash flow plan for you. And we're saying for $9.95 a month, you can have access to a really comprehensive tool. And the reason I invented it was because I didn't find anything out there that was as concentrated, as focused on the spending side of the equation.
I love that you have the ability to sort of play with it a little bit, like you said, right? Okay, I want to spend $20,000 a year in travel. Okay, it looks like that's going to be tough for me. How about I bump that down to $10,000 a year in travel and sort of see what it is? Question for you, and this sort of just popped in my mind as you were speaking, but you had mentioned Social Security income a few times. Is there a percentage or is there a formula where you see most people sort of what percent of income are most retired people looking at for their Social Security? So it's a number that you can find out pretty easily, right? Because Social Security sends you those little things in the mail every year, and it says, okay, if you were to retire at this point, you keep earning what you're earning, you're going to get this much every month from Social Security. So if someone had that and wanted to back in, is there sort of a formula or percentage that works for that? Or
Man, I love that you asked that question, because Social Security for a lot of people is the only guaranteed income that they have. Now, when we talk about guaranteed income, it's Social Security, pensions, annuities, and we also include rental real estate income in there as a guaranteed income. Now, that could be not, I found that different parts of the country have more stability when it comes to their rental market than other parts. So you have to be careful with the rental market. But a lot of the people that have rental properties seem to have pretty constant, steady cash flow from those properties. And so we include it in that formula. But when it comes to Social Security, you're right, there's complexity there. And I will tell you on my YouTube channel, so you go to YouTube/retirement budget calculator, I've got a video that I created to show people how to use two free tools to optimize your Social Security. The tools are called Open Social Security and SSA.tools. And those free tools, along with the information from your Social Security statement online, you can create a really detailed analysis to understand when should I start Social Security, 62, 67, or 70? You can also say, because there's spousal benefits, there's survivor benefits, it's tax efficient income. There's delayed retirement credit. So every year that you wait to start Social Security beyond your full retirement age, the benefit increases 8% per year. So that you've got all this complexity in Social Security, but we show people in this video how to make the complex simple. And then you take those numbers and you plug them into the retirement budget calculator. And the calculator, the way that we've designed it, is you can assign a different inflation factor to all of your income and your expenses. So with Social Security, it's averaged about 3.5% per year for cost of living adjustments. But to be conservative, we would say, maybe assume a 2% increase every year on Social Security. And then this is even better, because this is right along the lines of what you're asking about, is this, we created a dashboard, a retirement dashboard. So at one page, it kind of brings all of this information into focus for you. But we created something called the Secure Income Score. And the Secure Income Score looks at how much guaranteed income you're going to have from the point of retirement to the second person's life expectancy. So all of the guaranteed income over two people's lifetime. And then it looks at all of your essential expenses over that period of time. And it compares how much guaranteed income do you have versus your essential expenses. And we set the benchmark at 80%. So what we're saying is, if if 80% of your essential expenses are covered by guaranteed income, that gives you a ton of confidence heading into retirement, because then you know, well, I may have more expenses than that, but a lot of those additional expenses are those discretionary things. If you had to cut back and take one less trip every year, that's a lot different than not being able to pay the electric bill. And yeah, so you're asking all the right questions, and that's what the calculator's been designed to do. Some of it's free, some of it you have to pay for, but everybody can sign up for the calculator and see if they like it. It doesn't cost anything.
Well, you're providing so much value. I love that you just, when you see a miss or when you see a opportunity to provide value for others, you're just creating those tools and sharing them with others. So very cool. The one of the reasons that my wife and I always talk about, how are we going to invest and what are we investing in and what are our plans for the future, is because I have a mindset that I'm not going to live a life where I'm going to just rely on the government to
Mm,
ensure that I'm okay.
good
So
plan.
if Social Security is there when I am ready for retirement, it will be a bonus, but that is not the plan. And it can't be. I think it can't be.
Well, 2032 on our Social Security statements, there's the Social Security Trustees report that puts out a study every year that says, here's when Social Security is not going to be able to pay all the benefits that have been promised. So this isn't me being a doom and gloom negative guy with my own numbers. This is actual the Social Security Trustees that put this out, and it's on the front page of your Social Security statement every year. But right now, they say in the year 2032, Social Security is only going to be able to pay out about 75 to 80% of what's been promised. And so one of the things you can do in the calculator is you can say, okay, well, run my Social Security to 2032 and then have that benefit stop, create a new income stream, and show that income being reduced by 20%, and then say, how do my numbers work under that scenario? And we've created the calculator where you can create multiple models. So you can say, okay, here's a baseline model, here's a best case model, here's a worst case model, and you can look at how inflation is going to affect the plan. What if I get a low rate of return? What if I live a really long time? What if Social Security gets cut? What if somebody needs long-term care in the future? You can start to take away all of these what ifs, all these things that create the uncertainty for people, and that's where you get the confidence. So again, there's three things we're trying to deliver: clarity to know what's most important in your life, confidence to know the numbers are going to work. And when you have clarity and confidence, you experience freedom: freedom from fear, freedom from greed, freedom to spend your time with the people that are most important to you. And I am really, if we are successful at what we do and we can give people clarity, confidence, and they experience more freedom, I think America gets better, because now you've got people that are willing to invest in the next generation. They've freed up time to mentor other people. And there's so much confusion with our young people in the world today that if we can get that mentorship, I mean, I'm a product of mentorship. I wouldn't be where I am today if it weren't for the gentleman that encouraged me and invested in me and spoke life into me. And so I'm excited that we can create that type of opportunity, because in America, I think that's the way people are naturally. I think a lot of Americans think that way. They think, how can we pass on to our kids something greater than what we were given?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So cool. So I joke that we already got to the second part of the podcast, but normally in the second segment, I talk about healthy habits, healthy routines. We talked about your running. Is there anything else that you have as a routine or habit that you feel is a contributor to your business? Something that you do personally, maybe it is a morning run, meditation, or some sort of habit or routine, and how that affects your professional life.
Yes, that habit of running has been a game changer for me. So again, a little bit of a cup of coffee in the morning, a 2 or 3 mile jog, and something positive that I'm filling my mind with is just such an amazing way to start your day. So I definitely would encourage that. Another thing that's been really important for me is my faith.
Mm.
And so on Wednesday mornings, I meet with a group of men and we study the Bible together. And there's a lot of wisdom in that room. And it's just that to me is really gives me a different perspective on the world and my day and my week, and it gets me to refocus. And so that's been instrumental. And then Jim Rohn, who well, I guess it wasn't Jim Rohn that said this. It was that basketball coach. What was his name? Oh, darn, I'm drawing a blank, but he said you become the average of the five people you spend the most time with. And so I'm really intentional about the people that I surround myself with in my life. And, it's good to be able to mentor people and help give a hand up to people that are struggling, but you can't spend all of your time with people that are in that mindset, in that frame of life where life is just a constant struggle. It's good to be able to be with them sometimes, but you need to surround yourself with people that are at the same level of you and hopefully even a few steps ahead of you. And so I really make sure that I surround myself with good people, that I've got friendships and I've got activities outside of work. And my relationship with my wife has been really important. We've been married 26 years now, and I can tell you that I would not have achieved to be where I am today if it had not been for the this amazing woman that has been willing to stick it out with me for 26 years. So I would say those are some of the things that.
Great.
Yeah. And then more recently, I'm trying to get focused on what I consume. Think of food as fuel rather than just pleasure. And so I'm really disciplined. I'm good with breakfast, having a banana in the morning and having a salad for lunch. But then at dinner time, everything goes out the window, and I just don't focus so much on my nutrition as much.
It's interesting. It's probably, and maybe this is a average American type thing or whatever, but it's probably the toughest part for most people. I had a lunch meeting today, and both people that I was meeting for lunch were actually traveling, and so they were not from the area. They were traveling, and we had a pretty lengthy conversation about how much more difficult it is to choose the right things when you're traveling. And is it a mindset? Is it, you're probably at restaurants a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's something that I'm struggling to focus on too, is food as fuel. And I think oftentimes we surround food around certain environments that are celebratory, and it's
Mm-hmm.
time with family, and it's time when everyone's getting together. So then it becomes such a social part of our life that maybe we enjoy it too much and overconsume,
Yeah.
or we see it so much as that then it becomes, okay, we're socializing, so we have to eat, and we're eating, so we have to socialize. And they sort of become the same exact thing to us. And I can tell you, I do very well with breakfast. And I think that's what actually brought this subject up. I recently traveled with my family,
Mm.
and I regularly, I do fasting. I do intermittent fasting. So I don't eat in the evening, and then I don't eat until around 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning. And when I do, it's usually some fruit and oatmeal.
Mm. Mm.
But for some reason, when I travel, I go to these restaurants for breakfast, and I have a big giant breakfast, and it's like
Yeah.
all the meats and the eggs and just walk out of there feeling, oh my God, what did I just eat? And that's how I
Yeah.
start my day. And then I notice that from there, it's just bad food decision upon bad food decision upon bad
Yeah.
food
Yeah.
decision. So that's one that I'm working on myself, is food as a fuel versus just
Well, here's what
shoveling it in.
I think we all get to this place, but for me, as I get closer to age 50, I find that if I'm not really mindful of what I eat in the morning, I can't perform at the same level that that I expect from myself. Like my
Yeah.
brain gets real foggy if I eat a bunch of carbs or a bunch of junk, a bunch of sugar at lunch. I'll feel like I'm crashing, an hour later. And so I've just found that it's really not an option. That's why my breakfast and my lunch have to be so structured, because I want my mind to be sharp. John Wooden, that's the basketball coach. I
Okay.
was trying to remember that. But so it's one of those things where, and I think ultimately, my dad is amazing. He's almost 70 years old, and he just about a year and a half, 2 years ago now, he quit eating all meat, sugar, dairy products, and he went totally vegan. And
Hmm.
this was not him at all. But if you saw him today, he's retired. He works out probably 3 hours a day, so he's lifting weights and he's on the treadmill. And then he was about 230 pounds before he started on this diet. Through exercise alone, he was able to get down to about 200 pounds. But then when he went to the all vegan lifestyle, he's down to 170 pounds. He got off all of his blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication. I mean, the guy looks, and you talk to him, he's out umpiring Little League Baseball,
Hmm.
and he's really healthier than most. He's healthier than me, is actually is what I would say. But he lost a ton of weight, and he looks great, and he feels great. And so I'm inspired by the way that he has really taken control of his diet and his exercise. He's one of the few people that I would say seems like he's getting healthier as he gets older. And I think part of it is because he retired, and so he has the time to do those things.
I love hearing stories like that. Great. So
Me
let's
too, but I'm not disciplined enough to give up the cheese and the meat and the sugar.
it'll come. It'll come.
I told him he needs to move in with me so he can be my personal chef. Then maybe it would work. But
So I want to move into the final segment where I ask the same three questions of all of our guests. So for you, Jason, what is your definition of success?
well done, good and faithful servant. So a friend of mine asked me this one time. He took me through this values discussion. Yeah, every time I would answer, he would come back to me and say, "Okay, well, what else? What's next?" And as we went through that process together, there's a verse in Matthew 25:21 that says, it's the parable of the talents. And um, there's three people that were given something. One was given a little bit, one bag of gold. One was given a couple of bags of gold, and one was given multiple bags of gold. And so at the end, the master would come back, and these people that had been entrusted with something of value had to report and say, "Here's what I did with what you were given to me." And in many of those instances, the answer was, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And I think, man, that would be a really cool thing to hear at the end of my time as I'm walking through those pearly gates. It's
Hmm.
like, well, Jason, well done, good and faithful servant. But I'll tell you the other thing I learned from this, and I've read that story so many times. I don't know if you're familiar with this at all, but
I'm not, no.
the guy that was given the least in this parable that Jesus tells, what he did with it, he was given one bag of gold, and he went and he buried it. And in this, he says, "I was afraid and of who you were, and so when you came back, I wanted to be able to make sure I gave back to you what you had given me."
Hmm.
And that one person that was given the least, it says he was cast out into darkness, and there was gnashing of teeth, and what he had been given to the one who had been given the most. And this responsibility that we have of giving it everything that we've got with everything we've got, like that was one of my takeaways when I read that. But the other thing that I read, and I had read it multiple times before I saw this jump out to me. He said, "I was afraid." He let fear be his decision making, how he made decisions. And it was because of fear that he experienced these extreme consequences at the end of life. And I heard somebody say once, they said, "Look, you can be safe. We can put you in a corner, bring you 3 meals a
Hmm.
day, have no adventure, no experience, just keep you safe as long as possible, take care of you, give you a blanket, make sure the doctor's checking on you, and we can get you all the way to age 100." And the question is, well, yeah, but what kind of life is that? A life of no adventure, a life of pure safety. I mean, that is not anything I think anybody aspires to. And so when you recognize that fear can lead you down the wrong path, you have to learn to deal with that. And that's one of the things that verse taught me. And that's what I hope that I will hear as, "Well done, good and faithful servant," when it comes to me being successful.
I love that answer. It's very original. I haven't heard that, and I'm actually going to look that parable up because I'm interested to learn more.
If you do, I'd be curious to hear what you take away from it after you read it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, question number two, for someone who's newer to investing or even learning to focus on their goals and their path to success, could you give a good book recommendation?
Well, my own book. Sound retirement planning.
Hmm.
That would be one. The new book, Retirement Calculator, How Much Money Do I Need to Retire, for the people getting ready to retirement. If you're just overall investing, Morgan Housel has a new book out called The Psychology of Money. And
Hmm.
it's just really an amazing book. It will change the way that you think about investing if you read that book. A couple of classics that I like are As a Man Thinketh. It was written in 1910, and it's based on, and loosely based on this verse that says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." But it's so obvious in the natural world. If you plant corn, you grow corn. If you plant tomatoes, you grow tomatoes. And if we think of our mind as fertile soil, what we plant grows. And so you can't fill your mind with a bunch of garbage and expect to grow a healthy, fulfilling, joyful, abundant life. And that's what the book As a Man Thinketh is about. It's a short book. You can find it for free online. And then the other one that I really like that's been very influential was Napoleon Hill's book, oh gosh, Think and
Think and
Grow
Grow
Rich.
Rich.
Think and Grow Rich, yeah.
Yeah.
And that my big takeaway from Think and Grow Rich is the power of the mastermind. This idea that when you bring more than one person together, this third mind is created. And that's one of the reasons I'm very intentional about getting together with other people and just having conversations like we're doing here, hearing people's life experience and how do you live a good life, and somebody to hold you accountable. And I had a mentor that I told you about, and one of the things that my mentor did for me was he said stuff to me that offended me at the time, but ended up being kind of life changing for me. And I'm glad that he had the courage to speak that truth into my life at those moments. So
Wow. Excellent list of book recommendations. I love it. I'm jotting them down as you go along. A couple of them I've read. I did not read As a Man Thinketh yet, so I'm going to make sure to jump on that one. Oftentimes we spend time at home focusing on your mind listens to what you say, right? Your brain listens to the words that come out of your mouth and believes you.
mhm.
So, what you think, what you say, what you put into your mind grows. So this really falls well into some of my mindset. So I'm very, very interested in reading that one. Uh,
Yes, Abraham Lincoln once said, he said, the written word is the only way that the dead can speak to the unborn. And I love that idea that
mm,
we've got all of this wisdom available to us. Are we willing to go out and consume it? And today it's so easy. You've got podcasts, you've got Audible, listening to books on Audible, you've got the written word. So much of this stuff is free online, but you just have to make the choice to make it a priority. Yeah.
absolutely. So before we move into the final question, first I want to thank you for coming on and thank you for everything that you've shared. You've shared a lot of great information. How can we support you? How can people reach out to you? And if you want to give your web address and how they can find the retirement benefit calculator and also your books.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm actually here to help you and help your audience. So I would say that the retirement budget calculator is even if all you use it for is the free version to really understand your spending, the Personal Finance 101, the very first thing you learn in personal finance to become successful with money is to tell your money where to go at the beginning of every month so that at the end of every month you're not having to ask, where did all my money go? So it's just that small discipline of being intentional with your money, and you can use that for free in the calculator. So in terms of reaching out to me personally, I actually don't, I'm trying not to have people reach out to me personally. I would prefer they use the calculator, use the tool, plug into the podcast, Sound Retirement Radio, or read the books. If they sign up for the calculator and they end up with a premium subscription, there's a private community portal that we built into the calculator. The idea is, let's bring smart people together. Let's create that mastermind effect. And these are people that have done well in life and they're heading towards retirement, and we can learn from one another. And so I do hang out in that community portal inside the calculator. So if people sign up for the premium subscription, they can tag me and we can have conversations in there. But yeah, so I would point people to the calculator first, and maybe the podcast and the book second and third.
Great. And final question. So if you could think back with me to a young Jason around the ages of 10 to 12 years old, sort of your preteen years, knowing what you've learned so far on your journey, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give to that young Jason, or really to any preteen child, to help guide them towards success?
Yeah. Number one is you do become the average of the five people you spend the most time with. So be very selective about who you're spending your time with. And if you are hanging out with people that are making bad choices and living unhealthy lifestyles, it's going to take you down a path that you it's probably not going to be productive. So number one is be mindful of who you're spending your time with. The second one I would say is that understanding the value of relationships. Everything good in my life, I love playing this exercise where I try to understand how I'm connected to different people. And what I found, there's this something called the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule.
Hmm.
And it's true with relationships too. 80% of the relationships that I have in my life are a result of 20% of the people that I know. And so when I really go through this, connect the dots, like how do I know this person? Usually I can narrow it down to three people. My dad is a huge connector for me. He's the reason that I was connected to my mentor, my friend Dean. And then my wife is a huge connector for me. So when you realize that most of the relationships in your life come from just a handful of people, you got to do everything you can to protect those core relationships. And the other thing I would say, I mean, the reason that the calculator, the software came to be is because when I was a young guy in my 20s, I taught a martial art called Aikido. And I was responsible for the kids' classes. And one of the dads was a computer programmer. And so years later, I was at one of my wife's art exhibits and I saw him and I said, "Hey, I'm trying to take this spreadsheet and turn it into software. Can you help me do that?" And he said, "Yes." And that was the first developer that we had working on the retirement budget calculator. It was a result of a relationship of, small community. And you, at the beginning of our show, before we started recording, you talked about that book, Who Not How,
Yeah.
that Dan Sullivan is one of his newer books that came out. And I found that a lot of those who's, those people that we need to know, they're within a circle of influence. So it's always just asking the people that we know, "Hey, who do you know that's the best at this?" And then you talk to that person. Then you ask that person, "Hey, who do you know that's the best at this?" And it just opens up these doors. And that's how things happen. I mean, that's how I've been able to build software, which most people would say is not the easiest thing in the world to venture into. But it's a matter of those relationships. And then the last thing for me, I would say, is believe. Um, I started out as a young man growing up in a Christian family, but in my early 20s became an atheist and didn't want anything to do with God and Jesus. And when I first met my mentor, Dean, he said something that really offended me to the point where I almost left the interview.
Hmm.
He was interviewing me to hire me. And he said to me, he said, "Jason, I found that people that do well in this business usually believe in a higher power." And as an atheist, as a young man, I was so offended by that. I was, who is this guy to talk about God in a job interview? I mean, I almost closed the door and never went back. But I was so desperate for work that I had to kind of listen to him. But I think about that and I'm like, man, this guy planted this seed of becoming a believer at a time when I didn't want to hear that. And it was one of the most important little seeds that he planted in my mind at an early age. And so, because I've had this opportunity to walk life as an atheist and a non believer and view the world through that lens, and now I've also had the good fortune to know what it's like to be the prodigal son and to have this Heavenly Father that comes running to you with open arms, and you get to live this life of faith and hope and joy. Boy, it's so wonderful that I wish I could have told my younger me to find that faster. I don't regret that it took me a while because it's become my own, but it's just that life is so much more, and it's so much bigger. And it all depends on the goggles you wear. As a young guy in high school, me and my friends used to have these red colored glasses we'd wear, or blue lenses, or yellow lenses. And no matter what lens you put on, that's what you see the world through, right?
Hmm.
And so when I was an atheist, I'd put on my atheist goggles and I could find every reason in the world to not believe. And I could make fun of people and I could throw them under the bus and I could use science and all this wonderful stuff. And then when I was one of the hardest things you'll ever do is take off those goggles of skepticism and put on these goggles of faith and belief. But I'll tell you that that one decision is what changed my life, because I had the mentor, I had the healthy, I had run the Seattle Marathon, I had the college education, I was doing everything right in the world. But it was when humbled myself and I asked Jesus into my life, that everything changed for me. It got better. And so now everything that I do today, I try to point people to that, because it's what made the biggest difference. Having the money doesn't make the difference. Having the relationship and Heavenly Father does. And so, those are the three things I would tell my kids and my kids' friends and anybody that's willing to listen. I know it offends a lot of people these days, but that's part of the promise. We're promised all of these blessings, and Jesus said, and persecution. So when you stand for something, be prepared to have people that disagree with you. And when you stand for nothing, you can be friends with everybody, because it doesn't matter. Everything's okay. And so, yeah, I would encourage people to consider some of those things.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time and the value that you've had. Make sure you check out Jason Parker. Make sure you check out his podcast, his books, and most importantly, the retirement benefit calculator, retirement budget calculator.
The word that nobody likes.
At retirementbudgetcalculator.com. Thanks so much, and go out there and make it a great day. Thanks so much for joining me on the Healthy Investor Podcast. Check out the show notes for more information about connecting with our guest. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please head on over to iTunes and leave a positive rating and review. It would mean the world to me. I'm grateful for your support, and I wish you an abundance of success on your journey to healthy investments and a healthy life.